Housework is women's work. Have some shame asking your husband to help. My husband commanded me with a smug look on his face to do the housework despite my broken bone. I thought he should be the one ashamed, but maybe divorce was my only option. Just then, my usually quiet, book-loving daughter dropped quite the bombshell. So there's another child in this house. I guess that would be my little brother. My name is Miranda, and I'm 65 years old, raised in rural Arizona. There's only one thing I slightly regret about growing up in Arizona, and that's the story of my dark marriage. In my 20s, my boss introduced me to a man from one of our client companies, who later became my husband. Some might find it strange to be introduced to someone through work, but it's quite common in small towns. I wouldn't know about city life, I've never lived there. But in my area, neighbors and even college professors had this peculiar habit of trying to play matchmaker for single women. My husband, being older than me, was knowledgeable about things I didn't know, and his conversations were always interesting. He was well trusted by his superiors, and seemed to be a perfect gentleman who was considerate of women's sensitivities. Looking back, I suppose it was natural that I, who looked at this know-it-all man with starry eyes, ended up marrying him. But now I wish someone had slapped some sense into me and yelled, "Don't do it." We dated for 6 months. Without living together before marriage, we tied the knot rather quickly, and before we knew it, we were blessed with a child. Because our courtship was brief, at first it was exciting to discover new sides of him that I hadn't known before. But around the time our daughter turned 2, I started seeing things about him that I would have been better off not knowing. Until then, he had been someone I could rely on, who would listen to my stories and sometimes offer advice. But he began cutting me off when I tried to speak, saying things like, "Today, my boss was going on and on about his achievements. It's really annoying because I'm the one supporting him behind the scenes." If I try to respond with, "Oh, that must be tough. Workplace issues can be challenging. You know, He'd interrupt with, I don't want to hear about your stuff." He just wanted to talk about himself and have me listen. It seemed like he thought of me as nothing more than someone to vent to. Sometimes he would listen to me, but as soon as the conversation got going, he'd cut me off with, "Enough. You talk too much. Get me a beer." It was the same even with topics about our daughter. I could never really consult with him about parenting. Come to think of it, our dates before marriage were always alcohol-free because he drove me home. Was it familiarity and routine that changed him? Or did alcohol bring out his true nature? Maybe both. Still, since he was a good husband when sober, I tried to brush it off when he interrupted me, thinking he must be tired from work. One day, we were invited to a colleague's wedding as a couple. Since they had attended our wedding, they specifically asked both of us to come. It seemed only proper to attend, so naturally, we both went. "Hey, congratulations." My husband found his colleague at the venue and wrapped his arm around the groom's tuxedo-clad neck, offering warm congratulations. I also offered my congratulations with a bow. As my husband and the groom were chatting cheerfully, I heard some unforgivable words from my husband's mouth. "Listen up, once you're married, you need to properly train your wife. What happens after marriage is crucial. Make sure she understands that she's able to live thanks to her husband." While his colleague listened with sparkling eyes saying, "Yes," I was mortified just being there. Train his wife. What are these people talking about? Shouldn't they be the ones getting re-educated about basic human rights? Given the celebratory mood, I couldn't bring myself to spoil the atmosphere or embarrass my husband by saying, "What are you talking about?" The lecture would have to wait until we got home. After the wedding, when we returned home and my husband was drinking, I brought up what had happened. "You know, you shouldn't talk about training your wife. Men might think that way, but it just makes women uncomfortable." I tried to choose my words carefully, trying to be considerate of his good mood while drinking. However, what? "So you think that way too?" he interrogated me. "I've been feeling secure because you do the housework without me having to say anything and keep everything clean, but I never thought you'd be a woman who doesn't appreciate her husband." I was stunned by his words. True, I had been playing the role of a wife by mimicking my mother whom I'd watched as a child. I would quietly refill his drink glass when it was empty and handle all the household chores, cleaning, laundry, everything. I didn't mind doing it and had been proactive about it, barely giving it a thought. But at this moment, I realized that my husband saw it as something a wife should naturally do. "I am grateful. I'm a housewife living off your income. But I don't think it's right to say such things about other people's households. Every family has its own dynamics." "Shut up." My husband, inexplicably enraged by my comment, slammed the table. "Once you become a wife, it's only natural to be obedient to your husband. That's what being a man means. I'm letting this slide because it's me, but normally you'd get slapped for talking back to your husband." I felt like I was finally seeing my husband's true nature. As I stood there speechless, he said, "I never thought you were such a shallow woman." Then he made a show of pouring his remaining beer down the drain, violently crushed the empty can, and stomped upstairs to the bedroom. It was as if he was saying, "I'm angry, and you should be scared. Do as I say." It goes without saying that my feelings for him instantly went cold when I saw this husband who couldn't control his emotions and thought that whoever got angry won. The next morning, my husband acted as if nothing had happened and ordered me to bring him his tie, saying just, "Tie." While I would normally comply without question, today I couldn't help but think, why should I? Looking back, my father was the same way. My mother dutifully took care of my father, and I thought that's just how marriages worked, but perhaps my father was also a domineering husband like mine. Without the internet back then, it was hard to properly understand what constituted an overbearing husband, but at the very least, I don't think they're supposed to make loud noises to intimidate their wives. While my husband acted as if nothing had happened that morning, changes started appearing gradually after that. For example, with my makeup. When I tried wearing slightly bright pink eyeshadow, he yelled, "A married woman shouldn't wear colors that attract men." I wanted to talk back, but stayed quiet to avoid trouble. When I styled my hair in a trendy way, he'd yell, "Don't dress so disgracefully at your age. Are you trying to embarrass me?" Thanks to my upbringing, I was used to things like him coming home and demanding food, or "Where's my coffee?" But even my father never tried to dictate my appearance. It seemed that ever since the day I talked back, my husband had become more focused on educating me about how a woman should be. While I love my parents, if I had grown up in a home without a domineering father, I might have realized sooner how abnormal my husband was. Looking back now, there were so many red flags. Though I was gradually becoming disgusted with my husband by this point, I had a 4-year-old daughter. She was attending kindergarten, and if we divorced, there would be issues with changing schools, plus concerns about whether I could make it on my own as a housewife. It was especially tough being a single parent in those days. Being a single mother would significantly reduce my chances of getting hired, whether for part-time or full-time work. I thought I'd try to save money by working part-time while continuing my married life. But when I told my husband, "Dear, I'd like to get a part-time job," he slammed the table. When I looked up startled, there he stood with an enraged face. I froze, unable to speak. "Are you saying my earnings aren't enough?" While that was technically true since divorce was my goal, I couldn't say that now. "No, that's not it. I just feel like I'm becoming isolated from society just raising our child. I need some social experience so I don't end up teaching our daughter outdated things." "That's what you say, but aren't you looking down on my income?" "No, I get it now, you just don't want to do housework. Even if you start working, you'll still be doing all the housework." While he was completely missing the point, being told that actually made me not want to do the housework. I snapped and finally said those words. "I'm tired of being with you. Let's get divorced." He probably hadn't expected that. My husband's eyes went wide, and his mouth fell open. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, I understand perfectly well that I'll be better off. I'll take custody of our daughter. I can manage to find work if I stay with my parents for a while." While saying it myself, relying on my parents felt a bit pathetic, but they'd probably forgive me if I made it up to them after getting back on my feet. I thought, so this is how abruptly a marriage can end. Reconsider. I was wrong. Well, actually I don't even know what I did wrong, so please tell me, I'll fix it. To be honest, my husband's words about not even knowing what he did wrong were refreshingly sincere. It's natural he wouldn't understand, given how fundamentally different our ways of thinking were. This was much better than him pretending to understand and apologizing. I thoroughly explained my frustrations with his attitude, our differences in thinking that had worn me out, and how I couldn't envision our life together working out going forward. "I had no idea I was causing you so much pain. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk about it, but you always interrupted me, so we could never have a proper discussion. I'm just tired. I'll never do it again, so please give me another chance. It hurts to be separated from both you and our daughter." My husband said this with tears in his eyes. Come to think of it, this was the first time I'd seen him cry. Despite everything, it's hard to stay strong when the person you chose to marry shows you their tears. I also knew how much he adored our daughter. So, after warning him, "This is your last chance," we reached a compromise. I would give up on working part-time, and he would work on his attitude, and held off on the divorce. For nearly 7 years after that, we had peaceful days. Well, there were occasional glimpses of his domineering nature, but I think he tried his best to control it. He would apologize quickly, so I learned to let things go. However, one day it was decided that my husband would have to transfer to a different location for 2 years. He chose to go alone rather than make our elementary school daughter change schools, but this decision would greatly alter our family's fate. When he returned after his scheduled 2 years away, he had become even more domineering than before. Was it a reaction to living alone at his post, where no one did anything for him? Or was it because his promotion had him ordering subordinates around, and he was carrying that attitude home. While I couldn't understand the change in his mindset, it was clear that his solo living had cultivated an even more selfish and inconsiderate husband than before. To start with something very small, after returning home, he frequently forgot to turn off the bathroom light or didn't completely turn off the faucet. Naturally, I got angry about this. After all, electricity and water bills aren't trivial. However, he would yell, "It's my money, so I can use it however I want. Besides, if you see the light on, you should just quietly turn it off instead of nitpicking about every little thing." It's strange that when I point out it's wrong to leave lights on, he gets defensive with whoever notices it should turn it off. You're so petty to point it out. Apparently, his transfer location had been near his parents' home, and he'd visited them often, because he started saying things like, "My mother may be old, but she's not careless like you," over the smallest things. For example, when I served store-bought side dishes for dinner because I was short on time, or when I put leftover field trip sandwiches on the dinner table, he would complain endlessly. Our daughter enjoyed the food, and it wasn't like we were eating convenience food every day. Even the sandwiches were homemade. Well, I rarely cut corners, but I thought, what's wrong with occasionally relying on convenient options? Housework is hard work, you know. It really made my blood boil to watch him complaining while eating more than anyone else, completely ignorant of what it takes to raise a child, attend school events, and participate in PTA meetings. I was reaching my limit, thinking, if you're so particular about homemade food, why don't you make it yourself? I don't need to take criticism from a man who's barely set foot in the kitchen since moving into this house. At this point, the word divorce flickered through my mind again for the first time in a while. Then one day, of all things, I missed a step and fell down the stairs while heading to the supermarket, and had to be taken to the hospital by ambulance. I had broken my ankle. The recovery would take about 3 months. The doctor smiled and said it might heal faster if the progress was good, but that was probably just to cheer me up. At least, it hurt too much to believe it would heal that quickly. I suppose I should be grateful it wasn't my dominant foot, but everything was inconvenient. Because I had to take an ambulance, my husband had to come pick me up, and I felt a mix of guilt and reluctance to rely on him. When I thanked him for coming to the hospital, my husband, who was always good at keeping up appearances, kindly asked, "I was worried. Does it hurt? Are you okay?" It would have been nice if he had maintained this attitude throughout my injury, but my hopes were soon brutally crushed. It happened when we got home. When my husband asked about dinner, I suggested, "With my foot like this, I can barely manage to cook, so would you mind helping with the housework until my foot gets better?" We could even stand in the kitchen together and divide up what each of us could do. I thought that even my husband wouldn't say, "That's your problem, you do it," to an injured person right in front of him. What are you talking about? Listen here, housework is women's work. Have some shame asking your husband to help. My husband raised his voice with a smug look on his face as if he was speaking the absolute truth. So you're still the domineering husband even when your wife is injured? I felt beyond exasperation, I felt contempt. So there's another child in this house. I guess that would be my little brother. Our daughter, who had arrived home before us and was doing her homework at the living room table with her chin propped in her hand, suddenly dropped this bombshell. My husband let out a surprised, "Huh? What are you talking about? You don't have a brother, my husband questioned our daughter. Yes, I do. There's a big brother right there. When she pointed at him, my husband looked around confused, as if to say, me, with an expression so foolish I almost burst out laughing. You can't even make your own meals, so you're less capable than me, which makes you a child, my little brother. I can make my own food, our daughter said with a mischievous smile. Wait, this is between your mother and me, and you shouldn't interfere. This is like education for your mother. Huh? What could an idiot possibly teach? Someone who can't even get their own coffee or make their own meals has nothing to teach Mom. Our daughter was completely looking down on her father. Normally I would scold her with, "Don't talk to your elders that way," but well, my husband hardly qualified as someone worthy of such respect. First of all, I don't really think of you as my father, so could you stop acting so high and mighty? You only ever come to parent-teacher conferences, and it's always Mom who listens to my problems. Even when I was little and asked you to play with me, you were always busy, but really just absorbed in the horse racing section of the sports paper. But I did play with you sometimes. Come on, remember. Right? Oh, you made me pull weeds. While you mostly just rested, right? You call that playing? If this were dating, you'd be getting dumped. And first of all, that condescending attitude of, "I played with you," is annoying. Our daughter's sharp tongue, which had gotten a bit precocious since entering middle school, hit my husband hard. But we had family time together. You mean when you just talked by yourself? More like Dad's one-man show. I couldn't help but laugh when our daughter burst out laughing. My husband's face turned progressively redder. I've loved both of you all this time. You haven't done much to show it. If the person you claim to love doesn't feel loved, then that's just your own self-satisfaction. My husband finally fell silent at our daughter's logic. His back seemed to look smaller somehow. Can't say anything back, huh? Do you have any more of your self-proclaimed happy family episodes? Because I can keep countering them all day. My husband could only tear up without saying anything in response to our daughter's smirking face. While my husband never helped with housework or childcare, and never spent time with our daughter, he considered himself a good father. So this must have been quite a shock. But since our daughter never acknowledged him as a good father, we can only say it was all in his head. Hey, since this is a good opportunity, can I say something I've been thinking about? My daughter responded to my question with, "Sure. I think I have an idea what you're going to say. Would it be okay if I got divorced?" As someone who always rushed back to my room because Dad's bragging at the dinner table was so annoying, I've been living like he doesn't exist anyway, so it's fine by me. My husband turned pale and nearly cried at our daughter's explosive statement. But paying no attention to him, she continued. "I'll be in high school soon anyway, and I'll get a part-time job to help support you, Mom. Let's live happily together, just the two of us." How reliable you are, thank you. Wait. My husband tried to stop us as we were proceeding with divorce plans on our own. But our daughter ignored him, saying, "Clingy men are such a turn-off. Now, go pack your bags," and pushed him toward the stairs leading to his room on the second floor. I smiled at him and said, "I'll prepare the divorce papers later, so please sign them." Realizing he had no chance, my husband spat out a pathetic parting shot, "Don't come crying to me when you regret throwing me away," and left our house with his packed bags. For about 6 months after that, my husband delayed the divorce, saying things like, "I don't want a divorce," and "I want to see our daughter, but when our daughter made the outrageous proposal, 'I'll consider it if you win at rock paper scissors,' my husband, lacking sound judgment, fell for it and lost to her. Finally, we were divorced. Of course, our daughter stayed with me, and through the division of assets, our house became ours, and we received child support. By the way, we gave him the car that was our joint property since I didn't have a license and it was old anyway. Occasionally, he would send messages saying things like, "I realized how precious you both were after losing you," or "This is me recently," with his photos attached, but our daughter just had fun editing his photos. While he continued to reach out to us, I now just found it amusing how completely his feelings failed to reach our daughter. After we finished receiving child support, my daughter and I moved, and we've completely lost track of him. As promised, our daughter worked part-time jobs while completing high school and went on to a fairly prestigious university in our state. By the way, I never touched the money she earned from her part-time jobs and gave it all back to her at her wedding. Even though I was a mother without much skill or education, I showed her that with determination and grit, you can make it work. My daughter's husband is a very gentle person, and I'm actually more worried about my daughter being a bit spoiled. Her husband says, "I like being swept up in her pace, so maybe it's okay." Well, they've been blessed with 4 children, so they must be doing well. After my daughter's marriage, I lived alone for a while, but at her husband's suggestion, I moved in with them. This was just a few years ago. When I moved in, my daughter's husband even had the house renovated to make it barrier-free. I'm deeply grateful for such a wonderful son-in-law. The grandchildren are adorable, and I'm having fun participating in childcare again after so long. These days, I'm looking forward to continuing to protect this lively home together with my daughter and her husband.